Guaranteed victory for the believers. We have sent messengers before you to their people with profound signs. Subsequently, we punish those who transgressed. It is our duty that we grant victory to the believers. God is the one who sends the winds to stir up clouds to spread throughout the sky in accordance with his will. He then piles the clouds up, then you see the rain. Excuse me. Then you see the rain coming down therefrom. When it falls on whomever he chooses from among his servants, they rejoice. Before it fell on them, they had resorted to despair. I'll appreciate God's continuous mercy and how he revives the land that has been dead. He will just as certainly resurrect the dead. He is omnipotent. Had we sent down upon them instead a yellow storm, they would have continued to disbelieve. You cannot make the dead nor the deaf hear the call once they turn away. Nor can you guide the blind out of their straying. You can only be heard by those who believe in our revelations and decide to become submitters. This life is very short. God is the one who created you weak, then, excuse me, sorry.
No worries.
God is the one who created you weak, then granted you after weakness strength. Then substituted after the strength weakness and gray hair. He creates whatever he wills. He is the omniscient, the omnipotent. On the day when the hour comes to pass, the guilty will swear that they lasted in this world only 1 hour. This is how wrong they were. Those who are blessed with knowledge and faith will say, you have lasting according to God's decree until the day of resurrection. Now this is the day of resurrection, but you fail to recognize it. Therefore, no apology on that day will benefit the transgressors, nor will they be excused.
Thank you so much, brother. God bless you. Peace, everyone who just joined us. We read from chapter 30, verse 47, all the way to 57. If you guys have any comments, please go ahead.
Well, I have a bit of a comment.
A what comment?
Yeah, I have a bit of a comment.
Go ahead.
We see in 47 that this is a promise from God, right? So we should all be completely certain that if we are believers, victory is promised to us, and not just in a kind of submission sort of way, right? Like not as a group of submitters, or that's obviously included, but even on a personal level, right? It's not just God will make the religion prosper. He promises every believer victory. And the subsequent verses, it talks about the basically how God sends the rain, and before the rain comes, people are closer and closer to despair. Right? It actually says they had resorted to despair. But then when the rain comes, obviously they're very rejoicing, and it tells us that just as sure, just as intense as the feeling of despair someone might feel, they should also be sure that God will revive the dead. I wonder if anybody else has thought on these couple of verses too, because it seems like there's kind of a complicated analogy here. But yeah, that's what I have. Thank you.
Thank you, brother. God bless you. Yeah, I tend to agree with verse that we read, 47. When it says it's guaranteed victory, it's not a maybe, it's not a, sometimes, it's always guaranteed. Meaning it's part of God's system, it's unchangeable law that he saves the believers and he grants us victory. But then for some people, they think that, victory means that we'll have like great political power, we'll have a country, we'll have a kingdom. No. Victory could be in the form of martyrdom, right? Jesus was martyred. He did not have that many followers. But again, he was granted one of the greatest blessings a human being could have, to be martyred in the cause of God. Same thing with Rashad. Rashad wanted to see that the Muslims become submitters and they all follow the Quran alone. It never happened for him. He was hasty in that regard, but then he was granted victory in a different way, in the format of martyrdom. Something that we often forget: the martyrdom in of itself is one of the greatest victories anyone can achieve. One of the prayers we tend to make as submitters, and we see in the Quran, is take us as submitters. I believe that's Jacob's prayer to God, and tells his sons to not die except as submitters. Now, not only do you
Am
You're
I the
cutting
only
out,
one
brother.
not reading? Not hearing? Oh,
Yeah, he's cutting out.
okay. Right. Okay, Brother Sajjad, see if you can reconnect or something. Could somebody let me type it in the chat? In the meantime, who wants to
Assalamu
comment?
alaikum. Could I
Like,
ask a question? What do you feel for the on 47? It starts with a we, so God and angels. We have sent messengers before you to their people. And then towards the end, it says, it is our duty that we grant victory to the believers. So that victory it brings it up as the as duty. Is that what do you think is referring to? Is that angels who have task that they take it as duty? This is their part to do on earth. Is it? What do you think on that? Back to you.
Yeah, that's my understanding. That that makes it so that the believers are the ultimate victors. So God makes it that the believers are the ultimate victors. That's the system. Now, when that's a system, the angels are going to have to partake in that, and it becomes their duty, whenever God decrees it, to support the believers and help them in their victory. That's my understanding.
Thank you, brother.
God bless you. Sister Brandy, you want to say something?
I do. Peace and God bless you all. I pray that everyone has a great night of destiny. Or all who have night of destiny tonight. I would like to. Every time I read these verses, that this life is very short, that the disbelievers will recognize like this life is, it just lasted a very short little while, like an hour. But the ones that are blessed, the ones who prepared for this day, um, um, that you have lasted according to God's decree. I always think of something I've always heard growing up is time flies by when you're having fun. And I'm not saying that submitters don't have fun, because of course we have fun, but it's a different kind. It's fun with awareness, fun with a purpose. We have a purpose every day. But the disbeliever, they're unaware. Their mind is just different. Their mind is blocked. Their mind is not thinking about God, not really that much thinking about, after this life. And I think that awareness gives you that sense of like losing sense of time. And you look back and you've wasted it. Like when you procrastinate, you go on about like you end up doing not the things that you need to do. And then when the time comes, it's like, oh my God, or like, let's say you've wasted all this time on your phone, you've been binge watching videos and all that stuff. You're in a sense of unawareness. And um and then when you disconnect and you come back to awareness, it's like, oh my God, where did all that time go? And I think that is a lot like of what, God is saying, how the disbelievers, they're unaware, and disconnected from reality because they're so involved and sucked into this worldly life that they just lose that sense of time. And I know that this life is short. So and I think whether you're a believer or a disbeliever, you do recognize that this time is very short, because the time in the hereafter is everlasting, it's forever. So this compared to that, it's nil, it's nothing, just barely on a scale, if even that. But yeah, it just always makes me think of the saying that I've always heard growing up, that time flies when you're having fun. But like I said, I just think it's that unawareness and lack of purpose.
Thank you, sister. When we talk about this concept that we've been here for like a short day or maybe 1 hour or one afternoon, we see this in the Quran in verse 30, 55, and in other verses too. It actually, I think this responds to a question that I've heard atheists make in the past. They often ask, if my mother goes to heaven who believes in God and me who's an atheist go into hell, she will never be happy because she loves me and she wants me to be in a good place, but then she sees me suffering. And well, the response is easy because on that day, all of these connections are severed. It talks about this. And imagine if you know someone dearly in this life. If your whole life was an hour, the whole time that you knew your spouse or your parents or your children, out of that 1 hour, which would represent your whole life, would maybe be a minute or two. So if you know someone for a minute or two now, it doesn't really matter to you all that much. And that would be on top of seeing the truth on the day of judgment that these people, these souls were evil. They were wicked to reject God's message, God's commandments. So there will be no connection. Matter of fact, if you see your family in hell, you don't really care because they're not really your family. That to me makes sense because again, we know each other so less for such a short period of time. When we're in the hereafter, we realize, okay, yeah, all these relationships that we had with people, they were not really real. It was like a video game. Like I got to know someone for a minute or two, or someone played as the role of my parent or my children or my spouse for a minute or two. That's it. It's not real. The real family is the one that is with God. We have God, the angels, the believers. That's us. That's the real family. They will really get to have that connection in the hereafter. Also found this verse 24:55 in regards to what Brother Ismail was saying about the victory. Let's read this. It says God's promise, kings and queens on earth. 24:55. God promises those among you who believe and lead a righteous life that he will make them sovereigns on earth, as he did for those before them, and will establish for them the religion he has chosen for them. and will substitute peace and security for them in place of fear. All this because they worship me alone. They never set up any idols beside me. Those who disbelieve after this are truly the wicked. We see this as God's system, that He grants us victory, sovereignty, and all of these things. It's just a matter of time. Once you prove your worth, once you pass the tests, once you become a true submitter, that's when you get to experience this. Because you have to prove your worth. It's one thing to say I'm a submitter, it's another thing to act like it. I was seeing this video. Someone was saying that for you to hold a value, for you to be really courageous and really believe in something, you have to be giving something up in return, right? Imagine if I go outside and say killing is bad. Everyone agrees with that. That's not, like, no one is going to oppose me for that. But if I go outside and condemn all the injustices and all the vices in society, people are going to turn on you. You will lose something. You will lose those relationships. You will lose those connections with people. And that's when your true convictions show. Are you willing to stand up for the truth if it means losing some worldly materials? And that's something that has to happen to every one of us. And that's a test. By the way, we read from chapter 30, verse 47 to 57. If you guys have any comments or questions, please go ahead. Yeah, God bless you, Brother Justin.
What do you think, peace be upon you? What do you think the Quran insists that the 54, actually 55, it says, on the day when the hour comes to pass, the guilty will swear that they lasted in this world only 1 hour. That's how wrong they were. Why do you think the guilty say that?
I understand that's for pretty much everyone. There is another set of verses that I need to find that similar statements are made that people think they were on earth for like one afternoon or something like that. Do you remember those verses or no?
I know that the righteous says they've been there for a predetermined time, short time. They say they've been there for a short time, but they never, nobody, I think it says the guilty says 1 hour only. Or day or part of the day, right? Okay, let me search.
Yeah, something like that. My understanding is that the reason why maybe the guilty are saying this maybe is because we did not have enough time. Oh, this was so fast. We thought the test is gonna take years. But no, it was just something that went away quite fast. But to me, it actually shows how this life is just an illusion. It's like, imagine playing a video game with VR headset. You're in there, you think everything is real, and you take it off. Okay, now this is the real world. In reality, time goes really fast here. We just don't realize it. We realize the true pace of time when we die, God willing. So, Yeah, but my understanding is that the disbelievers are just making this comment to say, okay, this was too short. We didn't have enough time. What do you think?
This is also in Surah 23, verse 113. It says, they said, we lasted a day or part of a day. Ask those who counted. I'm not sure this is related to this life. Probably it's just yes. So it says, he said, how long have you lasted on earth? How many years? They said, we lasted a day or part of a day. Ask those who counted. He said, in fact, you stayed but a brief interim, if you only know. So it's not part of a day, it's a brief interim. It's been corrected that way.
Yeah.
But it's interesting when 7 sleepers of the Ephesus also wake up, they say they've been there for part of a day.
Yeah.
So, well, that's more normal because once you go to sleep and wake up, and maybe it was day when you woke up, or it was night when you slept, you think, oh, a day has gone by. I think there's a perspective of you have time dilation in this world as well. And when you go to sleep, time goes for your brain in a different way as opposed to when you're awake. I think when you sleep, time goes much faster. You don't really feel every hour and every minute that you sleep. You felt like, time went like very quickly, especially if you're dreaming something that is enjoyable and you're having fun in your dream. Even if you're awake, you're having fun, you're having a good time, time goes very quickly for you. So it seems that our brain processes time in different situations differently. In addition to the fact that time dilation is a real physical fact, it's a scientific factor. You have, the faster you go, the slower the time goes. The farther you go from Earth, again, the slower the time is going to be. So, and so these things do exist in terms of physical elements, but I think one thing is a matter of perspective. Is that when you go to this life without the perception of how this, as you say, is an illusion, it goes by very quickly. When you wake up in the hereafter, when you come into the different dimension, how little this time on earth becomes really more apparent, as opposed, when God says that hereafter lasts much longer. I think one of the aspects of it is that we're not going to experience this, as opposed how we sense that dimension is very different. How we sense this dimension, the same way we experience sleep, very different than when we experience, because when we sleep also it's a time of, we kind of die, our physical, we're still, our bodies are alive, but we're not conscious of what's going on around us when we're asleep. But I think that's also an element, that we are in a different dimension, and that shows how short amount of time this dimension, this worldly life, is as compared to the hereafter. That's my understanding.
The whole idea is this life is fleeting, it's fast, it's not eternal, and we need to be striving for the real life. Whatever we attain here, the materialistic things, it's like monopoly money. You see your bank account, that's monopoly money, that's not real money. The real money is the credits you've earned at God. And when we get out of this monopoly game, you realize, okay, the worldly wealth doesn't really matter. Anything I attained in this life, having family, having houses, those things don't matter. What matters is, how righteous were you? How much did you worship God? How much did you uphold the commandments? How much did you commemorate Him? Absolutely, praise God. One other point I wanted to mention is 30:50. It says, you shall appreciate God's continuous mercy and how He revives the land that has been dead. He will just as certainly resurrect the dead. He's omnipotent. I feel like even with me, sometimes we're appreciative for some of God's mercy that come to us sometimes, right? Like, let's say you get a promotion, like, okay, now you thank God. Or something good happens in your life, now you thank God. we often forget that we have to be continuously appreciative because God is continuously blessing us. You're listening to us right now talking. When was the last time you thanked God for your ears? The fact that you can hear. When was the last time you thanked God for your eyes, for your health, for your wealth, for the shelter, for the hot showers, for the food at your tables? And these are some of the things we just take for granted at this point. You know, the freedom that we enjoy, we talk about the religion of God. People can't have this religious freedom that we're enjoying in a lot of parts of the world. When was the last time we were appreciative of that? And this is important. Don't just thank God when He gives you something. Thank God continuously because He's giving you something every day. The fact that you can grow your soul one more day. The fact that you can worship Him one more day. You have to be thankful for that. We often forget. Yeah, Brother Julius put a beautiful verse. Appreciative versus unappreciative, chapter 14, verse 7. Your Lord has decreed, the more you thank me, the more I give you. But if you turn unappreciative, then my retribution is severe. People sometimes message me, they come from traditionalist backgrounds. They say to me, "Hey brother, what is a prayer that I should do for making more money?" And I always tell them there's no like single prayer or single Arabic phrase that you have to say to get more money. That's not how it works. This is not a game. And the reason why they ask this is because that's what they've been told in traditional Islam. They tell them, hey, say this Arabic phrase like 20 times and God will give you more money. Say this 3 Arabic phrases in this sequence 100 times and God will give you health. Say these phrases like 50 times and God will give you a good spouse. But no, then like Brother Camp said, they make the religion like a video game. Oh, like it's like a cheat code they're giving you. No, that's not how it works. I always tell them, you know, I try to refer them to chapter 14, verse 7. Very simple. The more you thank God, the more He's going to give you. Just be appreciative of everything He's given you. You have some money, be appreciative for that, and He's going to give you more of that. You have friends, you have family, be appreciative of that, and He's going to give you more of that. You are a submitter, you're worshiping God. Be appreciative of God, of the religion, and that the fact that He's guided you, and He's going to guide you even more. That is quote unquote the cheat code. Just be thankful. But at the same time, it says, if you turn unappreciative, then my retribution is severe. I mean, this is a problem of mine as well. Whenever I feel like I'm going through difficulties, I become unappreciative. I'm like, God, why is this happening? No, I'm a submitter. Why are you doing this to me? And it just gets worse. So the test is to be appreciative at all times. If something goes bad, don't complain. Just say God is running everything. If I made a mistake, it's a punishment. And if it's not a mistake, then it's a test. Either way, I'm gonna pull through, God willing. And it often helps if you look at your past as a submitter. When did God not save you? Yes, we made mistakes. Yes, we paid for it. But when did He really abandon you? I don't think He ever did. He never does. And then we also have 3054 says, God is the one who created you weak, then granted you after the weakness strength, and substituted after the strength weakness and gray hair. He creates whatever he wills. He's the omniscient, the omnipotent. Aging is a humbling experience. When you're young, you feel like you have the world at your feet, you can do whatever you want. And sometimes you will become unappreciative. But I've found that God's system is humbling. You realize you're not really in control. No matter what you do, you're gonna age. Some people are obsessed with staying young. It just doesn't work. You have to accept that that's God's system. We all age. And that's okay. Doesn't mean that you're somehow worse. It's just you become weaker and get ready to go into the next life. And in the next life, as submitters, we're always healthy. I don't think there's a young or old in heaven, but we'll always be at the best stage of who we can be. Praise God. Well, Julius is saying that he thinks chapter 4:85 is a cheat code. Says, whoever mediates a good deed receives a share of the credit thereof, and whoever mediates an evil work incurs a share thereof. God controls all things. And also, this is important. I remember I had a friend who was a Muslim, very devout Sunni. But, and we had another friend who was a Christian, but he wasn't really religious, like maybe in name, but not really. And my Muslim friend would help him to scam companies or whoever, not people, but like these companies that would send them products. And I told him, why are you doing this? Why are you like helping him in this evil act? And he said, well, because I can't do it myself, maybe he can benefit off of scamming this company. And I told him, no, you can't advocate vice. You can't mediate an evil work. You can't do that. In return, what we should be doing is mediating a good deed, because we get the credit for it. Whether that's charity, whether it's giving God's message, giving someone a Quran, could be anything. As long as you're trying to participate and help, God is gonna bless you. Right now in the Quran study, usually people are silent. You could mediate a good word by contributing. You should, matter of fact. Praise God. There's also verse 52 and 53 we read. Says, you cannot make the dead nor the deaf hear the call once they turn away, nor can you guide the blind out of their straying. You can only be heard by those who believe in our revelations and decide to become submitters. You know, sometimes we get frustrated when we're like talking about the religion and submission with disbelievers. And that frustration is because we sometimes forget this, that we can't make the deaf person hear, can't make a blind person see. That's not your job. Your job is to proclaim the truth, and it's not the one that guides. So don't take it upon yourself. Sometimes I feel inadequate in responding to others, and I feel like it's my mistake. Maybe I could have explained it better. Yeah, explain better in the sense that give the message with kindness and wisdom. But if the person believes or not, it has nothing to do with me. It has to do with or that God allows them to be a submitter. Because being a submitter is a blessing. And we often forget that. We're like, hey, we're submitters, cool. No, not cool. Praise God. How many people we've given the message? So many. And out of like 100 people, maybe less than 5 maybe become submitters. And that's not your fault. That's God's system.
Yeah, just to kind of add on to that, it's kind of funny. Like when we see from 47 to 57, it's God is showing us proofs, and then still the people despair, or they, like they're unappreciative of God's authority, even prior. And like you gave a good example prior of how, like when's the last time you thanked for a warm shower, or hearing hearing VC, or being able to speak or see. Right? Like we take so much for granted, and then we despair of God's mercy. Like even though we've been given so much as a general whole. So yeah, like God provides as much proof necessary to appreciate His authority. The unfortunate reality is like us as a default, like humanity as a default, we're very unappreciative and very like we oppose God's authority, even though there is no authority other than God. It's unfortunate, but that's why, like as you mentioned, that's why the majority do go astray.
Absolutely. God bless you, brother.
God bless you too.
Peace. I'd like to follow up with your comments about verses 52, 53, and actually 54. And that is, most people, the majority of people, God tells us in the Quran, they are oblivious to their true self. They're oblivious to the reality, their real nature. Therefore, they become preoccupied with this life. And this preoccupation also includes the fact that most of them, when you talk about level of consciousness, their consciousness does not extend beyond whatever they experience via their senses, via their sight, their hearing, etc. This is why God is telling us in verses 52 to 53, you cannot guide the blind. You cannot guide anyone that is deaf. Now, we know that let's put it this way. God gives us an example in the Quran, for example, when the Prophet Muhammad turned away from the blind man and he was admonished and told that the blind man who did not have physical sight was in fact more eager and had a greater yearning for the truth and for guidance from God. What I'm attempting to say is that individuals who turn away repeatedly, who are committed to disbelief, they are in fact on an entirely different level of consciousness. Although outwardly we are doing some of the same things, right? We're living, we're interacting with other people, we're living, sleeping. God says in the Quran that the disbelievers are more like animals in as much as what? They eat, they sleep, they engage in the same behaviors. We're all engaging in these behaviors, right? But the bottom line is that those who are guided by God, of course, they're on an entirely different consciousness, level of consciousness. There's contact with God via Salat. They are aware of the fact that we are on a journey. This is nothing but a medium that we are placed in, and we're provided with everything we need to act out what we want. This is a mere medium we are in. What I'm trying to say in a nutshell is that disbelievers, those who refuse the message, they're on an entirely different level of awareness, consciousness, and to use a more common phrase, street phrase, they're on an entirely different wavelength. but sometimes we seem to forget that. In our attempts, God knows best, we're trying to convey the message to them. We want to be aware too that God is teaching us that they're on an entirely different level. Peace. Thank you.
Absolutely. God bless you, brother. Yeah, I mean, sometimes I get angry, fortunately, at people who just refuse to understand the most basic things. I think there was a discussion I had with this Christian girl, and she was saying the Quran says, "Be your wife" in 434. And I was like, okay, first of all, it's not in that context. You're taking it out of context, and I explained to her. But she's like, no, it says be your wife. Like, fine. Look at the book Samuel's. It says kill all the Canaanites. Kill their men, women, children, and even their animals and trees. And she was like, well, that's okay. God can allow that. And I told her, like, I was getting frustrated. I was like, God can allow you to kill, but He can't allow you to be your wife. And she was like, yes, God can allow that. And I was genuinely angry and frustrated with it. I was like, no, there's no way. This is cognitive dissonance. But what it is this person is blocked. They've decided they don't want to follow the truth. So God is blocked. And Brother Justin put a beautiful verse. Do you want to read it for us?
Yeah, God willing. I seek refuge in God away from Satan the rejected. We know that you may be saddened by what they say. You should know that it is not you that they reject. It is God's revelations that the wicked disregard.
Yeah, this would happen to me a lot. I make these videos on Instagram and I see people rejecting the message and I get sometimes sad. But I shouldn't get sad. Why am I getting saddened? Sometimes I get sad, I think, oh, they're rejecting me. But it's not me that they're rejecting God. And then sometimes I get sad because they're rejecting God. But why am I getting sad if they're rejecting God? God is fine. God doesn't need them. I don't need to pity God. God is the most powerful of all. He's in no need of anyone or anything. So if you see someone insulting God or rejecting Him, there's no reason for you to get mad or angry or upset. It's like an ant insulting a tank. It doesn't affect the tank in any shape or form. Like the ant is worthless. It's nothing in front of a tank or like a very tall skyscraper. It's nothing. Praise God. And Brother Julius put another beautiful verse. It says, chapter 10:41. If they reject you, then say, I have my works and you have your works. You're innocent of anything I do, and I am innocent of anything you do. Absolutely. I mean, at some point you have to realize, listen, it doesn't matter. You might have to disregard. Like, there's no point to this conversation. And listen, you got your religion, I got my religion, you have your works, and I got my works. And we're going to be judged for it. Because we wish to meet them in heaven. Obviously, we all want the family we're born into to also meet them in heaven. But unfortunately, some of them aren't worthy of it. And I know in a human way, it makes us sad, but it shouldn't. Because it's God's decision not to guide them and to guide you. I know that sounds harsh, but not everyone is blessed by God in that sense.
Peace. We have the example in the Quran about the soul in the hereafter. The soul has been guided by God, and the soul is joyous because they have inherited the hereafter, and they recollect on someone who was their best friend in this world, and they wonder where are they. They wonder where they and come to find out that this best friend, this very dear friend of theirs, is in hell. And I'm paraphrasing this verse in the Quran. The one who was guided says, by God, oh my Lord, I almost ended up with you. And I'm of course paraphrasing. I can't recall the verse offhand. But what it points out is that of course people that are nearest to you, that are friends, relatives, anyone in this life, God knows what is in the heart. God guides whom he wills. And that relationships in the context of the why we're here to begin with and the purpose of life, they don't really mean anything. These are, God tells us in the Quran that he tests us by each other and how we express our feelings to those that are close. This life is a test. Everything about it is a test. But in the hereafter, each soul will return to God as an individual, and based on what that person did in this life and God's mercy, they will meet with their predetermined destiny. Peace. Thank you.
Absolutely. Justin, were you gonna say something?
Yeah, just to piggyback on what's being said, right? Like, there's no matter of harshness here, right? Like, God could have, just cast people into hell and heaven right away without anything else. But God created these universes for us to bear witness as to what judgment we receive, right? And to see that was our decision. It was due to our appreciation or unappreciation of God's authority. And ironically, God just gives us exactly what we want. So, we have to appreciate the judgment and the method in God's system, because it's so far beyond us. It's like it's incalculable how much God has put into process. Like, God is all knowing. So we may look at things and come to a conclusion with a couple of things understood. God understands all things and makes his judgment accordingly, right? Like, he is the most equitable, as God says. So, there is no sadness when it comes down to the day of judgment. Everybody gets their rightful share, and that's why we must seek God's grace and mercy and ask him to redeem us on that day, God willing.
Absolutely. I found the verses Brother Douglas was talking about. It's chapter 37, 54 says, he will say, just take a look. When he looks, he will see his friend in the heart of hell. He will go to him and say, by God, you almost ruined me. If it were not for my Lord's blessing, I would have been with you now. Do you still believe that we die only the first death and we never receive any requital? So the sister is saying in the chat that chapter 66 verse 6, oh, you believe, protect yourselves and your families from the hellfire, whose fuel is people and rocks. Guarding it are stern and powerful angels who never disobey God. They do whatever they're commanded to do. So, and then she says, it's our duty placed on us by God to protect our families. God tells us to steadfastly advocate upholding the Salat, for example. In chapter 20, verse 132, says, you shall enjoin your family to observe the contact prayer Salat and steadfastly persevere in doing so. We do not ask you for any provisions. We are the ones who provide for you. The ultimate triumph belongs to the righteous. So the way this protection works is We just tell them what the truth is. We advocate righteousness and forbid evil, but we cannot get saddened that they decide to go astray. I know it's hard, even for me. I think about my family, I'm like, wow, I wish they would believe. Matter of fact, you can pray for them. You can pray that God guides them, but I don't think we should get sad that they're in the state that they are. We should not be sad about anything. We should not be upset about anything.
I think it can be sad a little bit.
A little bit, not too much.
If you love somebody and you see them doing the wrong things, you can be sad about them. I don't know, including your kids.
Mm.
I mean, it's hard. I don't know. You're single, so you still got a long way to know that.
Yeah.
I think there has to be a difference between what's natural, like what's the natural proclivity of humanity versus what is the ideal. And I think there's a like it is correct, right? Like we should have no objection, right? Like there should no like as God says, don't be happy of anything you acquire, or don't be sad by anything you miss, right? Because it's all written by God. So there is an ideal that we should uphold. And anytime we don't come close to that ideal, it's time to reflect and ask God to guide to refine us. But of course, we're human, right? Like we have our human inadequacies that we all must face.
I think anyone here thinks that if their children or, just put aside, even if your child does something that, you're not approve of, you don't think is the right thing to do, you don't think is the godly thing to do, you get upset, you get sad. And it somehow maybe reflects it on you, what you did. So sometimes those things are innately reflecting of sometimes that inadequacies that we have within ourselves. That makes us sad sometimes. That makes us, say, what, where have I gone wrong? Maybe because of this or that. I think belief is something obviously everyone has to decide for themselves. But people that are, within your family and you feel responsible for them when they do something unrighteous, and you feel you have played a part into it. So it's sometimes inevitable that you feel sad or you feel that maybe you should have done better.
I understand, especially when it comes to children, because parents feel responsible for them. And if they do something wrong, they're like, okay, maybe it's something that I did. Maybe I made the mistake here and there. Maybe I should have done things differently. It's my fault. Verse 53, chapter 53, verse 23 says, thus, you should not grieve over anything you miss, nor be proud of anything he has bestowed upon you. God does not love those who are boastful, proud. And we often do both. I see. If the children do bad, parents grieve over it. They get upset. And if children do good, they become proud. The idea, this sounds like people think not grieving and also not being proud means that you have to be as cold and as harsh as a stone. But I don't see it that way. It's about recognizing that God is in control. There's no reason for me to grieve over anything. If they've gone astray, if it was my fault, I repent for it. I look into myself, I try to do better. And if it's their fault, then it's their fault. I cannot grieve over God not guiding them. I know it's difficult. I know this is not an easy thing, but this is a high level of submission we're talking about that cannot be achieved easily.
Look at an example in the Quran. Let's look at an example. There is an example in the Quran in this scenario.
Jacob?
Yes, the Noah's son.
No. That's not.
Because that's a good
That
one.
wasn't the example I was going for.
Jacob? Are you talking about Jacob and his son?
No, there's no specific name mentioned. The parents cry, literally
Yes.
cry, and say, "Please, please." So, and God does not reprimand their parents, saying, you know, like, why are you crying over him not believing? It seems that this is a very natural thing to do.
What verse that says that?
I'm trying to find it. Give me a second.
Yeah, once again, like I said prior, the natural proclivity of man is something we have to get against anyway, right? Like, I don't disagree that, like, if my son were to be an out front disbeliever, I would not be saddened by it. Like that's just a natural proclivity. However, our natural proclivities are something we must go against, right? As God says, we're the most argumentative. As God says, we're the most unappreciative, right? Like, these are not good characteristics. Yet it is our natural proclivity, right? So there is an ideal that we aim for, and then where we are as a default, and like the progression towards that is where we're talking about. We understand that, like, there is many failures with humanity. However, the ideal is to consistently submit to the scenario, regardless of what it is, because God has it written, right? Like, that is the ideal. That is a total submission, right? Being there, I'm not claiming that, and I don't think Sajad's claiming that, but that is the ideal, right? For a total submission. Does that make sense?
Yeah, let's look at Surah 47, 46, verse 17. It says, then there is the one who says to his parents, bow to you. He says to his parents, bow to you. Are you telling me that after death I will come back to life? How come those who died before us never came back? The parents would cry for God's help and say, woe to you, please believe. God's promise is the truth. How would he would say, tales from the past. I don't know if there's this verse 18 says anything else. Such are the ones stamped by as disbelievers among every generation of jinns and humans. They are losers.
I think there's a difference between an emotion of feeling sad and being resentful or frustrated with with what's going on. So I think I see a distinction there where sure you feel sad, but also you can accept it and feel sad at the same time. And I think that's kind of, at least to me, that's what I would strive for.
Yeah. I just want to clarify one thing. I was looking into this word that corresponds to cry. It says yastaqithan. And this is used 5 times in the Quran. It's in the context of asking for help, crying for help. Not that tears come from their eyes and they're crying, but they're crying to God to guide them. I don't see it as a way that God sees crying for anything as good, because we have this in my culture. Come from Middle East and Iran. They have this culture of crying for like relatives when they pass away, and not just normal crying. They like cry and become genuinely depressed for months. And the idea is, for me, it's a lack of belief in the hereafter and the fact that God is running everything. I remember when my uncle died, I was really young, and I saw everyone is crying so much in the family. And I asked them, why are you crying if he's in heaven? Genuinely, I was shocked. I wasn't sad at all. I was like, okay, I'm gonna meet him one day, God willing. But they were just genuinely depressed, sad, and crying all the time. And it just made no sense to me at all. That if you truly believe in the hereafter, genuinely believe that there is going to be a hereafter and this person was righteous, why are you crying? What are you upset about? It's like they've taken a vacation and I'm going to meet them when I die, God willing. And that's not easy to achieve. I'm not saying this is something easy or simple, but again, this is a high level of submission that we strive to reach. that even when someone passes away that's dear to us, if they're a submitter, you have to be happy for them. They've gone to heaven now. They're living a good life. And if they're a disbeliever, then God didn't deem them fit to believe. That's God's decision. Either way, you can't object. I know it's not easy. It's very difficult. But that's my understanding.
Yeah, I think there's a difference. My understanding is the difference between something you miss and a sad situation that could happen. You know, you go apply for a job and you miss it and you become sad, right? God says, you know, do not be sad that you miss it. It was written for you that maybe you get a better one. But when there's a sad situation happens, you know, like you know, have a family, relative, parents, or someone who does not believe, you can become sad because you are sad for their, you know, you love them, you know, first obviously, and it's a natural human emotion. As opposed to missing something is that, you know, cannot suppress our emotions, because if you suppress emotion, it's gonna, you know, find its way in other ways. Emotions have to be recognized, have to be notified, but what's different from being sadness and being over, you know, you have to recognize it and you have to accept it, and then you can move on from it. It's I think this is culturally, sometimes we suppress some of our emotions and then we don't know how to manage it when it gets, you know, too hard. Acceptance is always there. You accept something happens. You're not objecting, but you're sad because of the situation.
That's contradictory, though, bro. Like, just respectfully, you cannot be saddened about something and accept it at the same time. Sadden, by definition, is an objection,
You're
right?
saying
Like,
that
and
emotion is useless.
I'm saying it
God give
it
you
is,
that emotion, right?
yeah,
People cry,
like
right?
yeah,
You're
yeah,
saying you
like
gotta be a robot? It doesn't make any sense.
No, let
no,
me go
but
ahead.
yeah, no, I'm not saying you live as a robot. I'm saying
But you
you,
have emotion.
well, brother, can I answer? Or?
Go ahead.
Let's just let Justin
Yeah,
finish. Go ahead.
yeah. Emotion is something like emotion is a symptom of objection, right? Like if you're super happy about something, like let's take the alternative, right? Like we have super sadness and then we have super happy. Super happy is actually, I wouldn't say a good thing either. And the reason why is because it's often because you think there's a correlation to cause and effect that you have. So it's either A, something that makes you feel like you had power over the situation, or B, where you recognize you had no power over the situation, right? That's usually where you get these highs and lows of emotion, right? You're sad because if it was different, you're wanting it to be different in some way, shape, or form. Well, that is an objection to the authority of how it's transpired, right? Like nothing
That's
can change,
that's
right?
your interpretation of it.
Well, no, that is emotion, right?
Well, no, that's your interpretation of what the emotion means.
Oh,
You're
so
interpreting an emotion
mhm.
and then you're giving it a certain meaning to it. Because if someone's happy that sees a relative, you say, "Oh, you cannot be too happy because you are trying to control it." It doesn't make any sense.
No, you're just thankful for the moment. You
Yeah,
appreciate every moment the same.
yeah. So having an emotion is nothing to do that you're trying to be in control of it. It may be, but that's one way of looking at it. Happy means that there's something that you like, and that thing happens. You can be happy about it. But I don't know how level of happiness would be. If you're like ecstatic, then it's too much. Or proud is different. Proud means that you associate that thing with like you being, like your ego comes in. But happy and sad, or or angry, these are emotions that we have, and God knows that. And is God saying, try to get a leash on it, not let it run wild, not let emotion run you. At the same time, you can experience emotion and have a leash on that emotion. Okay, I have that emotion, I experience it, but now I need to know how I need to manage it, how I need to direct it properly, rather than just letting it go wild and I just run with it. And this is what submission is, to my understanding, is that we experience all these emotions, and then now one way is to completely suppress them, not to experience it at all, which I think is not healthy. The other way is to experience them at the same time, have a control of them. You can become angry, but you cannot, become, yell and lash out and, use your hands or hit somebody because you were angry, or throw things around, because then means that your anger is not controlled. You have no control over your angry situation. The situation happens that you can become upset and angry, but then your soul must be, yourself must be big enough, grown enough to be able to control that emotion, be able to think, and you're reflective to see how is the appropriate way of reacting on expressing my anger, even with words, to be able to become someone who's in control of his emotion. You can become sad, but then you don't become despondent. There's a difference. You can become sad, but you're not going to be saying, "Oh, everything's gone. I'm going to go down there. Like, this is terrible. This something happened. This is the end of my life. God's not going to forgive me. I'm doomed. I'm cooked." This kind of thing that shouldn't happen, right? Something, a bad situation happened, and you become sad, sometimes for yourself. Or you become, objective to God. God, why are you doing this? So these are emotions that you have, but then you have to be able to control them. That's my understanding. But I don't think having the emotion itself is a sign of rejection. Having the emotion is an association that happened maybe early in your life, and those emotions will happen whether you like it or not. It's just a matter how you manage them, how you express them is the key.
So I have a verse here, chapter 2, verse 38. We said, "Go down there from all of you. When guidance comes to you from me, those who follow my guidance will have no fear, nor will they grieve." For me, emotions in of themselves are not sinful. Certain emotions, God forbids them. Grieving, fear of other than God, getting angry, being upset, aggression. All of these things we see God forbidding them throughout the Quran. And it goes against what we naturally want to do. And I used to think the natural sadness that we may have, the natural fear, instinctive fear that we may have of snakes or lions, I thought that was justified. But I had conversation with some of the fellow submitters, and I realized no, even that is not justified. You can't, if you have an irrational fear of anything, that's wrong. Yes, you can be conscious. God has given you your senses. You get an adrenaline rush if you're in a dangerous situation, but you should not fear anything. They were about to throw Abraham into the fire. What's scarier than that? But he's unshakable. And that's the kind of faith we're talking about, guys. He doesn't care. There's fire, he's gonna burn. But he knows God is in control. If God wills it, the fire becomes cool for him. And if God wills it, this snake will not bite you. If God wills it, the lion will not bite you, not eat you. And the sadness over and grieving over someone's death, to me, is usually a sign of lack of complete certainty in the hereafter, because there's no reason for you to cry. Logically,
The
if you think,
Covenant was sad when his dad died.
no reason for any.
He actually said it in a sermon. He was a sermon and says, "When my dad died, I was sad. When my mom died, he was happy because he knew his mom went to heaven, or he got a sign that his mom went to heaven, and then he was sad when his dad went to hell."
But I would say that's wrong too. You should not be sad over his dad dying too, because God decided his dad is going to die as a disbeliever. So why am I being sad for? That's what we have to get to. I know it's not easy, guys. What I'm explaining is not easy to achieve. I don't even know if I'm there myself. But
I think you're taking it too far,
Hey,
brother.
Emotion in human beings, what we call emotions or feelings, they are significant and highly related to the interpretation or meaning that we give an experience. And this is actually unique to human beings. This where emotion is related to meaning and interpretation. The technical word is apperception, but let's go beyond that. And see, in the Quran, God teaches us the true meaning of our experiences. He teaches us what these experiences are and what these feelings are in the context of the true reality, the greater reality, so that we don't become what I call, quote unquote, slaves to our feelings and our emotions. These emotions come forth from what? Our relationships and the autonomic nervous system. God teaches us and guides us what and what these are, what these feelings are in the context of guidance and truth and the greater purpose of this life. Thank you. Peace.
There's a verse that says, when the God, with God's commemoration of God, the heart rejoice. This is also an emotion. So it's all connected.
I think
Emotions
what
are fun.
yeah, I think what's being talked about is like specifically negative emotions, right? Fear, anxiety, grief, basically anything that may indicate an objection or a lack of trust in God or his qualities, anything that may indicate that at all. I think that's what is being like cautioned against, right? Or even or quote unquote positive emotions that lead to like pride, where you feel like, oh, I did this, or maybe this came from me, or I deserve this, and so on and so forth. Anything that would go against God's qualities, any thoughts, emotions, feelings, understandings that go against God's system in the slightest, or God's qualities, these are, I think we're talking specifically about these. And I think brother Sedra, correct me if I'm wrong, is just saying, hey, this is the bar, this is the ideal submitter. They have this level of control by God's grace over their emotions, and it's mostly because, like Brother Douglas said, is they see reality for what it is rather than the emotions that we sometimes assign to things, or the meanings, right? The meaning that we assign to things that cause our emotions. Right? I think it's because of that. So this is just like the bar. Now, yeah, it sounds a little bit crazy, but also people say it sounds crazy that for example, as submitters we say anything good is from God, anything bad is from us, like completely. Like even me stubbing my toe, me getting a headache, right? Me getting a parking ticket, I blame myself for that. People think I'm crazy for that, but it's like, no, it's because we truly believe when God says he's running everything, he's running everything, right? So it seems like something extreme, but it's just taking concept to its absoluteness that God says, and it is true. The verses do say, they will have nothing to fear, nor will they grieve. Right? When no grieving means no grieving. Right? Like it's not an easy feat. This is I believe this is after like years and years of fixing yourself, and even messengers struggled with stuff like this. Like you had Noah, who like was sad over his son, right, and asked God to forgive or save somebody who is doomed and as a worshiper, right? So uh, it's the human weaknesses is common. Is I believe what I'm hearing from Brother Amin saying, and what I'm hearing Sajad saying is like, hey, this is the bar, this is the standard that we should work towards. God, peace be upon you.
I don't, I don't agree that the goal should be not to feel those emotions. I think those emotions are an opportunity to reflect on God's role in your life and a reminder to, to turn to God when we are in difficult situations. So I think having those emotions is a tool to turn, to really grow closer to God. And I think we can feel those emotions without rejecting what God has, deemed to happen. It's just a reminder, hey, we got to turn to God in this situation. And so it's a way to grow closer to God. I don't think, in my opinion, I don't think the goal should be to not have those emotions.
I think that's beautiful, brother, what you said, in that we should use them as tools, right? The way I look at this is kind of like, so the body kind of has mechanisms to tell you what's going on with you. Like if I step on a nail, I'm gonna feel pain in my foot, and that's an indication that, I have something going on over there that's not good, right? And that's like the tool, the mechanism whereby that like we get informed that something may be going on. And yeah, if we're angry about something, for example, that's an indication that something is going on. And like you said, like using that as a tool to see, okay, why am I angry, and exploring that, right? And then what I understand is as you get more refined, right, as you get better and grow in your submission, and your paradigm of the world changes at a fundamental understanding, where if I could cite the example of Moses and his teacher, right? The guy goes and kills the kid, and Moses reacts, right? But that we would say, oh, there must be a reason for everything, and that was kind of the lesson for that whole story, that narration with Moses and his teacher, was that things are not always what they appear, and there's a good reason for everything. But yeah, no, emotions are great, and a lot of the times I've learned I was committing idolatry by exploring my emotions and asking myself, why do I feel or think this way? That was very well said, Bean. God bless you. Peace.
The Hindus actually have a very good way of explaining this, because in the Hindus, they have a concept very similar to ours in being free from, with being perfect happiness, perfect health, etc. Except they call it moksha, or enlightenment, right? Or like freedom from suffering. And the way that it's properly taught is that freedom from suffering does not mean that one does not experience pain, or one does not have emotional responses, because like pain is a physical response of the body, and emotions are a response of the mind. And listening to them and processing them is an important step, like especially when you're dealing with past events, and the people who ignore that instead of in the sake of just being like, oh, I'm supposed to be, quote unquote, enlightened or whatever, and not be bothered by anything. It actually ends up leading to psychosis and spiritual arrogance. So the point they make is that it's not about you never experience these emotions, a little bit of frustration, a little bit of anger, a little bit of sadness, a little bit of so on and so forth, but rather it's you don't remain stuck in them. You're able to get back and turn back to like, look, this is all um, the thing that is ultimately matters is basically how they describe God, right? And it's like those that's in control of things, and so on and so forth. So it's I found that was a very extraordinarily good description that I heard of addressing that very issue, because when a culture is built up around you have to be if you have even a little bit of fear, or even a little bit of anger, or even a little bit of like any of these emotions, it creates that kind of toxic psychosis inducing environment, because people are just ignoring things that they need to process and learn and grow from, and that's not the objective. The objective, like you said very eloquently, Elham, is like you experience the emotion, then ask yourself, why am I experiencing this emotion? And processing it that way, and healthily dealing with it and engaging with it, and then letting it go, not being stuck on it. Suffering isn't having not experienced any emotions. It's holding on to emotions that don't serve you and are only temporary. So I just thought that was interesting. Peace.
Peace. I had similar to the points that everyone's making here. So I was speaking to Thmitter, and we had a couple of reflections regarding the different emotions And one of the understandings that came to mind was that our reactions, whether it's anxiety, fear, sadness, anger, greed, all of these reactions stem from a cause, right? And this cause, I'm identifying it as the ego. And obviously, we all know this. Okay, cool, no problem. But the reaction that we have, the anxiety or the anger that we have, that is how the ego has trained the body to react, right? So the anxiety itself is not the sin per se, or the anger is not, even though anger is a sin, all of these reactions are harmful to the body. You know, when Jesus said, whatever comes out of you is what defiles you. So yes, these are sinful in the sense that they hurt you, right? Anxiety hurts you, anger hurts you, depression hurts you, sadness hurts you. No problem. At the same time, the ego is the one that has taught the flesh how to react to a circumstance. Because remember, like the concept of the 7 sins, right? Wrath, lust, greed, gluttony, sloth, and all of these are manifestations of the ego. So the ego is the root cause. And depending on where the imbalance of your ego is, or where your strengths and your weaknesses are, your ego, will go through the path of least resistance. Okay, you're really good at being patient, great, but you're really bad at, expressing yourself, and you can be really cruel and insincere or inconsiderate or whatever. And so the ego will flow through the paths where you're weakest at, right? And in that sense, when your ego, which is your desires, right? Like Rashad translates the word desires into ego, because desires manifests from the ego. It's what the flesh wants, what the ego wants. The ego turns into the desires. The desires is like, I want to express my anger this way. I want to express my anxiety this way. I do not agree with what God has willed. Even though we don't say these words, this is what the ego is saying, right? And it's not agreeing with what has been willed, what is happening. And so the reaction of the sadness and everything else is how the ego has trained the flesh to behave. And so where we come in, where our consciousness comes in, is in being aware, okay, that's my reaction. I don't agree with it. Where is it coming from? And this is where, there's a very beautiful quote that I was given once, which is know yourself by yourself, right? Which is where you can't really look to other people. This is where you fast, where you meditate, where you take silence and you sit and you're like, where is this coming from? And you start asking yourself, is it because of this? Is it because of that? Is it because I want this? And you ask those dark questions that give those dark answers to see what's the poison inside of you. And this is how you begin to identify these inner demons, or what we identify as the ego. And then once you've identified, okay, that's the cause and that's my reaction, now your job becomes to stop this process, right? And so you see it building up. And you're like, okay, there I am again. You see it's coming out again. I got to stop this. I got to stop this. So the sadness is just, when Rashad said he was sad, he recognizes the difference between, this is my desire. This is my ego speaking, essentially, having a hard time. But he also recognizes that sadness is an objection to God, right? It's stress. It's a form of stress. So he can recognize both realities, both this is how I'm reacting, this is how my body is reacting, because this is how my ego has trained my body, but this is also, what it means to not submit to God. And so he gives us therein many lessons of how to, begin to identify the cause and effect, because God says in the Quran that not a single thing happens without something causing it. Everything has a cause and effect, cause and effect, cause and. So our job is to identify going further and further up the chain to the origins, and then to stop that process from happening, and then rerouting it, because God says again, God will not change a condition for you until you change what is within yourself. And we're talking about within you. Like if you're an onion, we're peeling every layer to the core of your being as to why you're behaving with this anger, with this pride, with this arrogance, with this necessity to why do you get angry at someone when they don't believe in your dawah, and then you decide to control whatever. All of us carry this poison. Our job is to stop the process and do better and change that aspect. God willing. Peace.
Does anyone else have any other comments or questions about any of the verses that we read? It's 2 o'clock. I think we're creeping up on the halfway time. Isn't that correct, Sajad?
Yeah, we're even half an hour past it. So if you guys have questions, other topics too, feel free to ask. I do want to ask this because I see some submitters sometimes mention this and sometimes even advocate for it. And it's weird for me. I've seen some submitters advocate for secularism. And secularism means that, in its essence, that religion and politics, or the way governance should be applied, they have to be separate. Meaning it does not matter what God says on how to punish a thief, we'll punish it the way we deem fit. It does not matter how to have these regulations on how society should be run. We decide on our own what is the right way to do it. And religion is meant to be something you practice in home, or you're free to maybe preach it, but you can't have it as a ruling system. And I've seen this, some submitters advocate for this. However, from the verses I have read throughout the Quran, especially in chapter 5, 47 through 49, I believe, I see a different command in the Quran. It says, the people of the gospel shall rule in accordance with God's revelations therein. Those who do not rule in accordance with God's revelations are the wicked. And then 2 verses after this, the next verse says, then we reveal to you this scripture truthfully, confirming previous scriptures and superseding them. You shall rule among them in accordance with God's revelations, and do not follow their wishes if they differ from the truth that came to you. And then the next verse says, you shall rule among them in accordance with God's revelations to you. Do not follow their wishes, and beware lest they diverge you from some of God's revelations to you. My understanding is that secularism in its essence is the system of the devil that is saying it doesn't matter what God says. And to me, it's very satanic. At first, people think, oh, secularism means freedom of religion. It doesn't mean that. Secularism means separation of religion and politics. And that in of itself does not bring religious freedom. For example, North Korea is a secular country. It's very impressive. You can't even have a Bible or the Quran in there. China is a secular country, very little religious freedom. So this idea that secularism brings religious freedom is totally false. And as submitters, I don't think we can support such ideology. What do you guys think?
61 2-3, bro.
61 2-3 says, oh, you believe, why do you say what you do not do? Most abominable in the sight of God is that you say what you do not do.
Yeah, you can't say you believe in God's laws and then be like, well, we should make our own. That's
Let
like
me,
hypocrisy, bro.
yeah, let me maybe say what I think they're trying to say, right? Secularism as is, you're right. But if you look at if the highest value for God is freedom, then secularism for a lot of countries, especially Middle Eastern ones, would actually be a step up in freedom. So it's not an absolute sense. I think maybe they're trying to get at this. It's like, look, if the government doesn't care what my beliefs are, I'll be able to be a submitter. And they're coming from a place where they absolutely cannot be a submitter in their country. So in relative terms, in realistic relative terms, a lot of countries that are not, that say they're secularist are more tolerant, even though they don't like religion as a whole. It's easier to be a submitter there than it is to be in like Saudi Arabia. So I think maybe that's where they're coming from. I'm not sure if they're actually making a stance for secularism per se, but that's
Yeah.
God knows best.
Peace.
Go ahead, brother.
Secularism literally is the notion of separation between church and state, which does not exist in submission. It does not exist according to God's laws and guidance. God also says in the Quran that the righteous rulers and leaders, right? Those that are submitted rulers and leaders, they advocate righteousness and forbid evil. And I think, let's take, for example, the legal system and the court system in any given country. Let's take, for example, the United States. Law in the United States is based on what is called Risala, which means previous decisions, previous court decisions. There is a conscious, intentional effort in the legal system to ignore and omit moral law or God's commands. And we're talking here about, of course, what God literally reveals. So, in that sense, in the context of what God commands, God tells us that He revealed the law so that the human beings can promote justice. Anytime you have a system that ignores divine guidance or moral law or revealed law, that's not consistent with submission to God. There's no reality, there's no such thing as a secular life and a religious life in Islam. I'll use a very crude example. For example, I don't do what I want to do 6 days a week, and on the seventh day, all of a sudden, I become religious. Every day of a person's life who is a submitter, they are trying to translate their acts and behavior in submission to God. However, we want to bear in mind that the so-called Sharia law that traditional Muslims practice is not what God reveals in the Quran. You cannot force people to cover their heads. You cannot create a system where you try to backtrack and determine if people pay zakat. All of this Sharia law has nothing to do with what God has revealed as in terms of the innovations. But certainly a system based upon God's guidance and His truth and His justice is not really a secular system. And my last point, I don't want to be, too wordy. My last thing is that these so-called theocracies and as we know, these so-called governmental systems based on Islamic law are actually the opposite of what God has revealed in the Quran. Peace. Thank you.
Do you think that America was originally established due to godly rights, and what we're seeing now is the result of deviating from God's moral law and trying to tackle the law as if it's man-made?
Okay, what I would say is that in the preamble to the Constitution, it identifies, it recognizes God is the creator, right? We recognize that all human beings are created. We've endowed the human beings with what? Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, the truth. Early on in American law, it was based on moral law. It was based on what God has revealed, and very slowly they undermined this and degraded it and created a system that allowed them to ignore revealed law and God's law. And they substituted revealed law and God's law with legislative law, decisions and what have you. And this is why we have confusion and chaos today in terms of things as simple as gender identity, okay? Notion of being a person can be by what do they call it? Where you try to identify with two sexy,
Transgender.
transgender. So legally, they try to create a system where one can be transgender rather than abide by what God says in the Quran. So I do believe, getting back to your question, that initially, not all, but the founding fathers, most of them were theists, and they did believe clearly in moral law. In fact, they wanted to separate from the English law and the Church of England because of this. Thank you. Peace.
That's what I agree with as well. That ruling and laws and how we should govern our society is not based on what we think, but based on what God thinks and what God tells us to do. Now, in response to what Ismail said, yes, I agree. I think it comes from a place of people really not understanding what secularism even means. They think it means religious freedom, but in reality, it doesn't. It is true that among countries that are either theocratic or secular, usually the secular ones have more religious freedom, like the ones that we live in the Western country. But that doesn't necessarily mean secularism in its on its own brings religious freedom. There's many examples, even in Middle East. Syria itself was a secular country, but very oppressive, horrible actually. So to me, secularism is the same as Satanism, and then people say, well, look at these theocratic countries like Iran or Saudi Arabia. What about them? They're ruling in accordance with God's law. No, they're ruling in accordance with Satan's law, because they're not following the Quran. They're following the Hadith. Their rulings have nothing to do with the Quran. So that's the idea we have to understand. Quran gives us the most amount of freedom: religious freedom, political freedom, economic freedom. We can do whatever we want as long as it doesn't directly harm others. And if we want religious freedom for all the people, then we would support a Quranic constitution, which would grant freedoms to all people. Yeah, and Brother Justin is correct too. USSR was secular too. Same with China. Matter of fact, the worst oppressive regimes on earth were atheistic. You take Nazi Germany, those guys were not really religious. Hitler was not religious. USSR, they killed so many people. China, they caused mass famines and oppression. The most amount of killings is done by atheists. We've seen the world. So this idea that, oh, religion brings war and oppression, yes, if it's done in the wrong way, in a satanic way, not in accordance with God's law, it can do that. But if we truly lead our lives in accordance with the Quran, we're going to have the perfect society, God willing. Praise God. So I think that makes sense. Does anyone else have any other questions, any other topics? Feel free to ask.
Yeah, I was just gonna say it's interesting how the media always seems to zoom in on any kind of religious violence, but they completely neglect the oppression that's committed by communists and secular regimes throughout the world. And we know that the biggest number of casualties was at the hands of, the Khmer Rouge in Cambodia, in China under Stalin, under Hitler. Some of the biggest atrocities ever committed were under secular regimes.
Absolutely. I always like to use these examples. People say, oh, religion has caused all these wars, all the wars in the world, all the killings are because of religion. Well, the biggest wars in the world were done by atheist people, secular people who didn't care about God. Because this is interesting. Because even with the ones with the false religions and false belief system, they still have that little belief in God. But when you deal with atheists, they don't see humans as humans. Like they don't see life valuable or sacred. Even with false religion, maybe there's a little bit of value in there. But with atheists, no, they don't see humans as valuable at all. They see them as expendable forces. They don't see them as souls, they see them like animals. That's why it's just one of the worst belief systems that cause so much corruption and death on planet Earth. They usually, no one talks about it, like Brother said. No one even says anything about, religious violence. If you look at the 10 wars that have the most amount of casualties, I think one of them is a religious one. That was the 30-year wars in Europe. But most wars are over politics, over borders, over resources. They don't have to do with God. Justin says, thus heaven, this is from Karl Marx, thus heaven I've forfeited. I know it full well. My soul, once faithful to God, is chosen for hell. Absolutely. I don't know much about Karl Marx besides the fact that he propagated the idea of communism. But yeah.
He was a son of a rabbi, so he was raised in a very religious family, and from what I gather, he may have felt oppressed by his father, which led him to go down the path he did, and his Communist Manifesto led to the deaths of over 100 million people.
I had a friend from Albania. When Albania used to be communist, he said that when the communists were ruling, they took control of all the mosques and all the churches. They closed them down. You could not preach the religion in public. You could not have Jumas or Sunday services. If you have religion, you keep it at home. And that's what many people want, unfortunately. They want to. Some people want to force their religion on others. Now, some people want to force atheism on others. You have to understand. No, people can choose to be atheist. People can choose to be Christian. People can choose to be Muslim. People can choose to be Samaritan. They should not only should they be able to choose this, but they should also be able to criticize other perspectives and preach their own point of view. And that's the most important right that we must have.
It seems to be the case that a lot of people, they get this idea that, since their experience with religion was somewhat oppressive, they make it their job to create ideas that completely reject God's moral law. And in turn, instead of trying to do good, they're the consequences of this kind of hate for religion leads to the worst kind of atrocities that man commits. After he wrote the Communist Manifesto, it was adopted by, the Bolsheviks, who slaughtered so many people, and then you have Stalin, who came in and he abused it so much that 50 million Russian people were killed in the war. And then you look at the Khmer Rouge in Cambodia, what they did to their people. We're talking about the most gruesome tortures you can imagine. And all of this due to one man's idea. And it just shows you how dangerous ideas are.
Yeah, absolutely. Whenever we move away from God, we suffer for it. And then for some reason, they like to blame God. Whereas we were the ones that initially decided to part ways, decided to stay away from God, and then we get hurt by it. We're like, oh no, it's God's fault. Interesting. I can tell you guys like how the pendulum swings. For example, in Iran, we have a theocratic government. It forces the religion of Shiism on everyone. It allows like the existence of Sunnis or Christians or whoever were already born into that religion, but they do not allow conversions unless it's into Shiism. And for submitters, we're already dead because they consider us apostates. They consider us disbelievers. And they've caused so much corruption, they've caused so much harm that now people want something even worse than secularism. I see some Iranians saying no one should be allowed to play the azan. If someone plays the azan, I'm gonna beat them and slap them in the face. Or we're gonna burn all the Qurans. We're gonna destroy all the mosques. And that's also wrong. We want to have religious freedom for everyone. You want to be atheist? Fine. You want to be Muslim? Fine. You want to be submitter? Fine. You want to be Christian? Fine. You want to preach it? That's okay. But don't go around, force it on others, and oppress others. That's where it's wrong, and people don't learn, unfortunately. A human being is wicked and is ignorant, and that's why most of us humans are destined for hell. That's the reality of it. The more I interact with humans, the more I realize why that is the case.
Do you think that the problem rises when it has to do with governorship? Because it seems to me like the clash occurs when you have, religious moralists and atheists trying to compete for governance, and then the atheists don't want to accept any kind of moral basis on the law, and that's where the rift happens.
Well, with the atheists, obviously, since they reject God, they don't want God to be the ruler. And they do feel like that we are forcing our religion if we're saying that the Constitution has to be the Quran. On one end, they're right to assume that because every Quranic, quote unquote, Quranic system or religious system they've seen is oppressive. But on the other hand, they're ignorant because they don't know what we're really talking about. So yeah, it could definitely be that they've seen or they've experienced such a horrible thing, or they reject God that they don't want any moral sort of ruling over them. They decide what's best for them. It's interesting. They sometimes tell me, "Oh, the Quran allows polygamy." That's so bad. I'm like, "How is it bad?" They're like, "It's bad." I'm like, "How is it bad? Just explain to me." And then they can't. They cannot explain to you morally why polygamy is wrong. They can't. Well, that's their problem because they believe in a subjective moral system where I think is wrong, therefore it is. And that's not going to get you anywhere. That's what the Nazis thought. Right? Like we think that the Jews are subhuman, therefore it's okay for us to oppress them. And that's subjective line of thinking.
Is it possible for atheists and submitters to live under the same government and not have conflict?
They're gonna oppose it regardless. Like even submitters are opposing me.
Under a submitter society, atheists can exist, but under an atheist community, submitters cannot exist. Right? We advocate true freedom, right? As long as it's not taking away the freedom of others, whereas they require the abolishment of God as an authority, because the state is the truth, right? Not God. They require God to no longer be the authority. Whereas in a community of God, God is the authority and you're held accountable as an individual.
For me, I do think we can coexist absolutely in a society that's ruled by the Quran, but I can't. I imagine that many atheists are going to be opposed to it. They're going to say, "Well, I don't think marking the hand of the thief is morally okay. We should jail them for 10 years instead." And they have their own line of thinking. Some of them might accept, some of them won't. But fundamentally, they're different than us. Like their whole perspective on of life, why we're here, where are we going, is inherently different from us. So I don't think we can really be on the same page. We can coexist, we can be friends, but I don't think they will support us. To be honest with you, what do you think, Shogeitan?
Well, I think that atheists have been notorious for shaming anyone with a view of God's moral law. They tend to make you feel as though you are backwards, that you belong in the Stone Age. And with a lot of the liberalism that's going on, if you put up any kind of moral argument, they tend to make you out to be some kind of pariah who is trying to mistreat people. And I've seen it in America, especially.
I mean, one of
Peace.
the peace, brother. Go ahead.
I'd like to add to what Brother Shagatin just said. If you ever call for jury duty, they have a preliminary interview where they question you. And one way, and I'm not trying to be funny, I'm just saying it for what it is. One way one can be relieved of jury duty is to imply or tell people directly that you adhere to moral law, you adhere to God's law, you have a moral criterion. Chances are you will not be selected for jury duty. Thank you. Peace.
God's gift.
I mean, I've heard about that jury duty. First of all, I think it's suppressive to be forced to partake in something, but I don't even think it's right in some cases for submitters to partake in these legal proceedings because they impose unquranic punishments on people. For example, it's clear for me if someone commits murder, they have there's the restitution. They can be killed by the family of the victim if they're of the same gender. But I don't think it's right to put someone 50 years in prison just because they killed someone. Again, they've committed a sin and they have to be punished according to the Quran. For me to partake in putting people in jail, I don't know how's that going to help anything. Overall, I don't like participating in a legal system that's unquranic. Like someone smoked weed, they should have to go to prison. That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I think that a lot of these kind of laws, they attempt to be more fair, but they end up being more cruel than the Quran.
When we talk about marking the hand or the Quranic punishments for like corruption, that's like banishment or cutting the hands and feet on the alternate side, or even execution or crucifixion. People think, oh, it's so harsh, it's so oppressive. I invite them to go look into the prison system, like how these individuals are treated like subhumans for years on end. Like, what's the point of having someone in jail in prison for life? I don't know. I don't know what is that going to achieve for us as a society? We have to pay a lot of money to keep them there, to keep them in a horrible state for what? If someone killed someone, okay, the family requests that they can be executed. You go on with your life. If not, the righteous thing is to forgive them and get a compensation, which is the right thing to do. But overall, the prison system is really not something that's good for society, but yet we think it's okay. Like, it makes no sense to me. Like, if someone steals something from me, I want them to return that money to me for the pain and suffering and whatever I've lost, not for them to be in prison. Like, what's that going to do for me? It's not going to do anything for society. They come out of prison, they become hardened criminals. They don't reform in there.
Yeah, that's exactly it. These people, they don't become reformed. They come out worse criminals that they went in. They become, they become part of the system. And when they enter in the prison system, they are required to basically join a gang. Otherwise, you're alone. And you are, in order to survive, you have to commit crimes in the prison system, and all kinds of, and you're put amongst people that are extremely evil. And so it doesn't leave a lot of room for you to be, reformed. If anything, it does the opposite. And what you see is broken families. You see people that when they come out of the prison after 20 years, they don't know where they fit in anymore. They're lost, so they go back to crime. It's like a vicious cycle that is apparent in the American society, especially with the African American community. You see how much damage the prison system has done. You are punishing the crime, but you are not dealing with the cause of crime. You're not dealing with the reason why people are committing crimes. You are just issuing punishments, and you are perpetrating a vicious cycle on the people. And so what you see is a lot of families without fathers in their homes, and the children, they grow up unable to feel any kind of structure, because the father tends to provide this in a family. And a lot of these boys end up going out on the street, joining gangs, and end up in the prison system as well, to the point where sometimes you have fathers and their children in prison, where you have some prisons where a father is locked up with his own son.